every morning, my teacher would say, you wake up, your eyes open, you say thank you. Because every day is a miracle. Every day you have another cycle of the sun to live and to grow, to understand. So every day when your eyes open, you say thank you. And before you go to sleep, say thank you. And it's not just say it, mean it, feel it, think it, be it. So that's gratitude. So I want to talk a little bit more about my background, and it's going to relate to this concept of a whole being communication. I want to go through that, and I actually have a little bit of a PowerPoint for that as well. So we're going to fire up that PowerPoint. So just give us a few seconds, and we should have that ready to go. And we can walk through some of my experience with whole being communication and how it's really affected my path and led me to this point. So hold on just a second, please. As a child, I was raised in connection with nature. Actually, that picture there is a picture of pretty much my childhood home. My parents bought a teepee, and I resided often in the teepee, and we traveled around the country utilizing the teepee, and I really was deeply impacted by that. And some very, very unique and special things happened through that teepee as part of the teepee. And just for an example, if you notice the picture, it's an old picture, obviously, but there's actually like a rainbow that is entering the door of the teepee in that picture. And these were the kind of things that would happen. So it wasn't just that I had nature connection. I also had this experience of things that were not common and that really had no context in the modern world that I could relate it to, but I knew it was true. And kind of the proof is in the picture. That's, as far as I can see and as far as I understand, that's not a defect in the picture. That's somebody took the picture and there it is. So that was my experience as a child, or one of many, many experiences as a child. But for the most part, I was also just a normal child, a normal teenager eventually, and did all the fun things that teenagers would do. And something occurred though at 15. When I was 15 years old, there was it was like a deep insight, where I actually saw people, and I saw this harmony and balance that I'm talking about and I've been talking about, and I saw how far people were off that mark at that point. And this was right around the year 1988, 1989, and it was in a sudden moment, of clarity that I saw this, and I recognized that we had become disconnected from the reality of what life is. Life, our own personal lives, and I also saw that connection with the natural world. We had lost that in many ways, and that this was impacting the world around us in unhealthy ways. And then through this insight, I also saw a possible future, which was not pleasant. It was where people were really struggling to survive. And the people that were really struggling to survive in this insight were the generations that came after us. Increasingly it became more difficult because it was so far out of balance. And generationally, generation after generation, it became more and more disconnected from the natural world, and thereby the harmony and the balance that was supposed to be in the natural world became shattered and broken. Through this period of time, I went through some incredible life changes, and in that, I was directed and guided towards going to nature. I pretty much stopped or cut ties with my old life and my childhood friends, and they weren't really understanding what was happening anyways, and I just went out into the wilderness, and I really looked to the purity of nature for help in this, and that was what I was guided to do. I was seeking the guidance of nature, And I wandered the wilderness as far out as I could go, looking for these answers. And as I would do this, I would get flickers of images as well. Sometimes, oftentimes, I should say, when I was deep in the woods and there was a presence, and the only thing I can compare it to now is just nature perfected. It was nature in perfection, and it seemed to be like a being of some sort. She emanated the feeling like a shady old growth tree, just beautiful and strong and powerful, and that shady old growth tree growing next to that laughing river, that laughing stream, just bubbling right next to it. So you have the ancient, and you have the joy, you have the laughter, and you have all of that put together, and this was that presence. And I started to question, well, what are these images about? I'm searching for this cure for the sickness. I'm searching for guidance. And I'm in the woods, and I start having these thoughts, these images come. And I dismissed it because I really didn't understand it. We'll talk about what it was and what it is later, because it actually directly relates to the next webinar. It relates to this natural state of being we call the 7 sacred attributes, and how that can manifest and show up on in a spiritual context. But after a bit of this, in my wanderings, I started to feel almost like a body pull. You could call it like a magnet, and it pulled me towards this mountain, a nearby mountain that we live by, and it pulled me up, and I just felt that pull so strong my body would travel there, and it eventually ended up on these western cliffs overlooking the valley below. And I would go to this mountain day after day, and I would carry these questions up there, these sacred questions that were just the driving force of every step and every movement. And I just would go to these cliffs and search and ask. And eventually I got to the point where I intuitively felt like I needed to do something, and I had this gut instinct like I needed to make an offering of some sort. I continued to have these insights and these images come into my mind, and some were very clear and definite, and some were not. Some were kind of like random, and it didn't seem to have any context. So what I eventually did was I asked for a teacher, and I said I needed a human teacher. I need somebody that understood this so that I could actually have that human-on-human communication and learn that way, because I can't quite understand what's happening here. And within a very short period of time, within a few months, from the west, from the Dakotas, a Native American healer basically showed up on my doorstep. And at first I wasn't sure who this was, and I didn't want to jump to conclusions, even though there was a lot of synchronicity to it. But I attended one of their connecting practices, their advanced connection practice, the ceremonies that they do, and their ceremonies about connection to the earth and healing that relationship, bringing people back into harmony with it. And when I witnessed the healing power of what they were working with on such a dramatic way, in such a dramatic fashion, that I knew this was my teacher. I knew that with all my heart, mind, body, and spirit. I saw it, I felt it. My body intuition said yes, and my spirit also communicated that this was the way to go. And so I began that apprenticeship. And again, this was in right around 1989. And that continued for 17 years, and it still continues, I should say. But the intense learning period was 17 years. The first 10 years, that was it. That's all I did. I lived, breathed it. The work just continued, and through that process, I've witnessed thousands of transformative rites and ceremonies and processes. Active participant, integral participant with it. And I learned this system of healing, the system of harmony, the system of balance, not just for individuals but for communities, for for how it is applied out into the world. um, and this advanced connection practices, as I call them, these actually tools and techniques of doing this. And I say advanced because many things are connection practices. There's some very simple connection practices, such as the a sit spot is a great connecting practice, very simple, but um, if you take a connection practice such as, let's say, the sweat lodge, you have multiple things happening, and there's a systematic way of preparing for it, and there's certain things that happen within that purification, right? And so there's a complexity to it, and thereby I call it an advanced understanding or advanced methodology for connection. So that was 17 years of really intense learning around that, and that's the way or the reason that I'm able to actually speak about these things, because through that process I earned the right, and I should say the responsibility, more than right. I earned the responsibility to teach this. It's implicit within the teachings that you become a mentor for others, and I actually resisted that for quite a while. But once I came off of that, out of the teachings, and I came off the reservation, and I saw what was happening in the world, and it had been 17 years that I really recognized that there had been some huge shifts, and not necessarily for the better, since I had begun the apprenticeship. And so what I did is I decided to write a book about this. And so I wrote this book, A Man Among the Helpers, that describes that 17-year journey. And in that process, I met a person that most of you or all you are familiar with, this man, John Young, who has similar experiences with this healing lineage. Um, and yeah, John is my older brother and a dear friend of mine, and I've definitely learned so much from him, and it's really impacted my life in deep ways. And so now, understanding this whole journey, of really recognizing the disconnection sickness, and then going on this long process of learning and growing, and becoming a facilitator of these connection practices. It's now come to the point where I'm traveling across the world with these teachings. So, fulfilling that mentorship and fulfilling that part of the vision, that it has to go out to the world. The healing needs to go out to all people, as many people as possible. So we do these things, such as the Leadership Initiation Project and the webinars, and to just spread it as far and wide as possible.